Welcome for Scary Retirement Stories. Today on the Retirement Answer Man Show. I am your host, Roger Whitney, on this Halloween day. Welcome to the show that is dedicated to you not just surviving retirement. No, we want you to rock retirement. And today I want to share with you 4 pretty scary retirement stories that I have seen played out. And I hope that they serve for you as a cautionary tale so you can avoid a similar fate. But we can't do any of that until we have that all-important disclaimer. You know, in those Halloween movies when they're walking down the street and they're talking to some random person that looks a little iffy, and they ask for directions and this person points them down the alley and they say, "Oh, okay, thank you." And they wander on their way, and we all know what happens after that, don't we? Well, I'm not that iffy person, but you never know, right? I don't know much about you. You don't know much about me. Don't take advice from me. Even if I look like a good guy, I could lead you down an alley. I'm not going to do that. But the point is, think of this show as helpful hints and education. I don't give advice to people I don't know, and you shouldn't take advice from people that don't know you. Before you make a decision, talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor, because that is just common sense. Now let's go hit the hot topic segment and get a little bit scary. So in the Hot Topic segment, I want to just comment on a recent article about the pitiful state of retirement savings in our country. Now, and I'm not making fun of this. I have some fun with the music and things like this, but recently in CNBC there was an article, much like the ones that we've all probably seen, and the headline was, 1 in 3 Americans have less than $5,000 saved for retirement. In the article, Northwestern Mutual's 2018 Planning in Progress study said 78% say they are extremely or somewhat concerned about not having enough for retirement. For good reason, right? If 1 in 3 have less than $5,000, I think there's some room for some concern. Now, of those compared, it said about 1/4 of the people had $200,000 or more stashed away. 16% had between $75,000 and $200,000, with the average being about $85,000 saved for retirement. And then it says experts typically recommend to have at least $1 million. Where that number comes from, who knows? I hate numbers like that. I think that's silly. So if you assume a 4% rule, then that's what, $40,000 a year plus Social Security? Do you know how long it takes or how hard it takes to save $1 million? I bet you do. I bet you a lot of you have done it. And I'm not talking with stock options or company buyouts and all those types of things. I'm talking about if you're working every day, you're saving in your 401k, you're trying to raise a family. You know how long it takes to save $1 million? It takes a long time. I know plenty of people that have done it. Unfortunately, though, there are plenty more people that when they were younger, when it really mattered to get started on all that automatic stuff, they didn't know any better. They were never told or educated. They weren't self-disciplined enough. They still in the YOLO generation. You only live once generation. And then they get kids and everything else, and they can never find the money because they've never built the muscle of saving. And then they start really realizing it in their 40s and 50s. When all that power of compounding is gone or diminished. That's scary. So sure, it can be done. But if you're in your 40s or 50s and you're way behind the 8 ball, it doesn't matter what the study says or how much you have in your retirement account. Most likely, you're not going to be able to catch up in savings alone in order to fill the gap. And that's just reality for a lot of people. Not saying that you don't save. I'm just saying that's reality for a lot of people. And what really is scary is when the only solutions that are discussed are, saving. Just save more. Spend less. I get that to an extent. but it's not as easy as that always. So how do you get yourself out of this scary story if you find yourself behind the 8 ball and you don't have decades and decades of saving that you could have started in your 20s or 30s? Well, bluntly, I don't have the answer, but I do have some things that can really help you turn what might be a nightmare into an amazing life. Now, number one is you got to start saving as soon as you can. You definitely got to start building those muscles of saving. So that's number one. You want to put it on autopilot. Number two is you're going to have to reevaluate potentially what are needs versus wants and start right-sizing your life potentially. That's a hard thing for us Americans. I know it was hard for me. I've had to do it from time to time. Right-sizing your life so you're not building this financial cage of obligations and payments and car payments and credit card payments and house payments and all this other stuff that gives you no flexibility and sucks all the money out of your life. You got to really examine how you structure your life. Remember we were talking about sunk cost fallacy the other week? I remember at one point in my journey, we totally blew up our life from where we lived, the neighborhood we lived in, the house we lived in, and we right-sized it down very tight because it gave us more financial margin to achieve goals that we wanted. I had to reset. I was able to do it in my early 30s, but it was still painful. Number three is, I think you need to rethink what retirement really is. Because bluntly, if you want to have some margin in your life, you're probably going to have to work a lot longer than the quote-unquote normal retirement age of, whether you think of it as 65 or 62 or whatever number you're thinking. You're probably going to have to work longer than you have expected. Now, that sounds really depressing, potentially. Sounds scary. But change your mind, change your life. I'm not saying that to be flippant. If you know you're going to work a lot longer, then it opens up how do you noodle on ways of increasing your income, or how do you noodle on position yourself to work potentially in a different industry or a different job that gives you more time freedom and maybe gives you more upside. We call that pre-retirement. We can call it whatever you want. But if you create a life that you don't want to retire from, that can go a long way to improving the quality of your life and helping you overcome some of the past mistakes. It's not perfect. Can't control health things and stuff like that. But I guess the point is, the message that we usually get is, you just got to save more. And that's an important message, but I think we need more levers in order to make this stuff work, especially if we're behind the 8 ball. And a lot of that, outside of saving, are things you have control over if you're willing to be intentional on what can I do next. So these numbers are scary. I'm encouraged by a lot of people that are focused on financial independence, focused on being intentional, but there's going to be a lot of people that are starting way too late. Doesn't mean they can't improve the life, but it's just going to be harder, so we all need to be there to encourage them and help them focus on what they can do intentionally to take the next best step. Now, whether you've done everything right or not, in our practical planning segment coming up, I'm going to talk about 4 scary stories that I've seen more than I would prefer to, and how they blew up, for lack of a better term, a financial situation which was in a pretty good spot beforehand. Let's go talk about those in the practical planning segment. Given that it's Halloween, we are going to share 4 scary stories as a cautionary tale for you, so you might avoid the fate of one of these 4 mostly self-created calamities. And the first one I want to talk about is for you married folk. All right, let's go through marriage. I just had my 28th wedding anniversary. Woohoo! Been married 28 years. That's a long time. My wife and I met in college. Fell in love. I remember the first date I asked her out on. It was to a water park. Can't believe she still rolls her eyes that I took her to a water park on our first date. Worked at the same place in college. Got married at age 23, much younger than I ever expected to get married, but hey, we were in love. We moved down to Texas. We buy our first house. I have a job. She has a job. We're dual income, no kids. Pretty immature. Not fully formed individually in some ways, but we were in love, and it was difficult, right? At times, trying to sync up two individuals, and then we have children, fit the children into our lives, and then realize we need to slow down. So we get busy with kids, and we move our neighborhood, and she leaves work for a while, and I change careers. Always busy with the kids and with work and everything else, right? And this is a normal baby boomer kind of life, although we're Generation X. Kids start going, college, and, we're both having more free time, and we're focused on other things, and then we become empty nesters. That we're starting to think about, and this is where we're at right now, we're starting to think about, what's this next phase of life look like? Now that the kids are graduated from college, right? We're looking at the different roles. We got a lot more free time. And in a marriage, this can be a pressure point. Because what happens? All of a sudden, if you're not careful with your spouse, you look over, now that all the distractions are gone from kids and work and craziness, is this the lady that I love? Is this the guy that I want to spend the next 40 years with? Maybe someone looks over and says, I don't really know that person. Or maybe we feel taken for granted, not loved, not understood. It's very easy for this to happen in a marriage when you've been married a long time. My wife and I have gone through periods of some of these kind of thoughts, but I'm going to tell you, I'm very proud that we've been able to always communicate and recorrect so we could continue to walk hand in hand together. But over the years, this is one scary story that I've seen play out time and time again, where people were too far apart to get back together hand in hand. Too much has taken place, and they weren't able to get in sync again, and so they get divorced. I've seen this happen a lot in empty nest cycle of life. If it doesn't happen in the empty nest cycle of life, the next phase that I've seen it happen too much is in the retirement phase of life, because you're going through the same calculus. Now there are really no distractions, right? There's one or both of you are not at work anymore. The two of you are together all the time, thinking of what their 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s are going to look like. And the calculus in years past, generations past, was, I got 8 more years, we got our pension, we stick it out, even if it's not a perfect marriage. Well, even if you look at divorce rates in baby boomers and in retirement, see one of the highest increases in divorces because the calculus has changed. Even in your 60s, you're looking at this person that you're going to be spending 100% of your time with, saying 20, 30 more years? I don't think so. This is a scary story. Obviously, it's a scary story from the emotional roller coaster that's going to happen in any kind of divorce, right? But it's also a very scary story when it comes to finances. As bad as a divorce is when you're young, you don't got much. You got lots of earning power ahead of you, hopefully, both of you, especially if there are no kids involved. But if you're in your 50s or your 60s, you've probably accumulated the bulk of your wealth and your earnings power is much more limited. Now let's go divide half of that up. That's scary. That can ruin 2 lives financially when it comes to retirement, not to mention the emotional toll. So one of the best investments you can ever make is in the relationship with your spouse. I don't say that to be sort of flippant about it. I am serious. The more you can be walking hand in hand with your spouse, realizing where there are pressure points when it's easy to lose each other, the more you can be aware of all that and be intentional about your relationship with your spouse, the more you're going to be able to avoid this very scary story. So the next story I want to talk about is Well, it feels like it's become the American way. And that is building your own financial cage. I've seen this happen a lot too. And again, it really can accelerate in the empty nest stage. But it happens to single people too. Listen, we live in a consumer-driven economy. And I think you realize probably intellectually that the entire economy is scientifically designed to suck money out of your bank account and your wallet. It's scientifically designed. From the advertising industry, which creates emotional feelings of being incomplete and then offers you up something that's going to complete that picture of yourself in your mind, that's all scientific. They know how to push our buttons and manipulate our thoughts and our feelings in order to get us to consume. It's scientifically designed to decrease the friction of spending money. I mean, think of Amazon Prime as the perfect example, right? One button click shows up at the house the same day or the next day. Apple Pay, there's less tactile feel between spending money. There's less distance. There's almost no distance between the thought of buying something and actually going to do it. I can remember having a few extra dollars and getting on my bicycle and riding a mile or two to the corner store to be able to buy baseball cards, or waiting after Christmas when I got the $20 from my grandma, it's probably 10, and waiting for my mom to take me to Myers Thrifty Acres, which was like Walmart in Michigan, and then walking the aisles for an hour while she shopped to spend my $10. How long does it take for you to spend thousands of dollars now, right? Amazon, Apple Pay. The time between thought and action is nothing. And that goes for the most part, buying a car, buying a house. We can spend tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars very easily. Okay, you get all that. Well, when we have the kids out of the house and college is mostly paid for, and we're in our empty nesthood, or if you're single and you're just in your high earnings years of your 50s, it's easy to build the outdoor kitchen, to buy the new car, to buy the new house, to buy the RV, to buy all the things, the toys that create fun, that we think create fun for our life. And the reason this is a scary story is a lot of times what I've seen happen is all of this is done right before retirement, and then all of a sudden we find ourselves having to maintain our stuff. We got to make the payments on the car and the house and the home equity loan. We got to store these gadgets. We got to fix these gadgets, these jet skis and everything else. So we basically create a financial cage that traps us into having to work as hard or harder just in order to maintain. And this can cause us not to save, one, right? And this is always a danger when we're younger, when we're raising a family, because there's never enough money for all the stuff that we got to do. So the second scary story that I see play out when it comes to retirement is encountering people that have created this financial cage for themselves of things that they identify as needs, a certain kind of house, a certain kind of travel, certain kind of vehicles, that end up limiting the financial decisions that they have, limiting their ability to have a life of more freedom because they're trapped in what they've created. Okay, the third scary story is related to the second, and it's sort of a twofer. I don't know if that makes sense or not. So, two other areas that I see that end up being really scary from a financial standpoint when it starts coming towards retirement is, number one, college tuition. Did you realize that baby boomers are some of the largest holders of student loans in the country for their children? Now, I'm not saying it may not make sense to borrow money to put your kids through school, but I've seen more than one parent almost commit financial suicide to enable the college dreams, the sometimes very unrealistic college dreams of their children, with a total disregard to what it does for their own financial health. One story I remember, this is probably 8-9 years ago. It was a client who had a son, and they wanted to be an actor, and they went to a private liberal arts school specializing in acting and spent about $60,000 per year for an undergraduate degree in acting at this very small private school. Financed the whole thing. This isn't an individual that had the cash flow or net worth to be able to support putting a child through school like that. I can't recall what the son is doing today, but they are not acting. And now the parents are sitting there with a couple $100,000 in student loan debt for their child in a degree that didn't necessarily prepare them for a vocation of any sort. And they were already a little behind the eight ball when it came to retirement anyway. This is some years ago. They're not clients now. But that is a pretty scary story. And I've seen versions of that play out where the decision to support their children in their college education crosses over the line of supporting your children and helping them become independent adults to enabling the dreams and the whims of young adults that may not be fully formed or able to make the decision of what they really want to do. Number one. And two, there's no calculus of what the return on investment is and the whole purpose of college to begin with. Scary. The second part of this goes to this overspending thing in a different way, and this has to go with the vacation home. There's a strong desire to have a vacation home. I can think of RVs. I would almost throw them into this mix, though RVs, you get into the hundreds of thousands easy. Vacation homes, you can easily get into the $500,000 plus. These are large amounts of money going out for things that are going to be used periodically. And they tend to be something that we buy. We're not buying the thing, we're buying the vision of a lifestyle that we see ourselves. Perhaps it's, if I have this vacation home, then my kids and their grandkids will all come. And that may be true, but we can romanticize that and realize it may only be for 1 or 2 weekends a summer. Well, that's a lot to spend for very limited times of something like that actually happening. So I've seen this start off as a small dream and take on a life of its own to where all of a sudden people are spending hundreds and hundreds of $1,000s on either an RV that gets very little use or a vacation home that balloons in size and becomes a financial burden. Because you got to think about the mentality during these periods of time. What's happening here? We are in a period of reimagining the rest of our life, of all this free time that we're going to have to pursue things that maybe we put on the back burner. That's all really cool. But what can happen is we can start to romanticize into spending lots of money and buying the dreams rather than buying the things to actually enable the dreams to come true. We attach them to things, which can be really dangerous, and it can be really scary for your retirement. Okay, the last scary story. Then we got to go to the happy lab after this. I'm getting a little too scared. This is depressing. Halloween has turned into this fun thing, not this scary thing. So the last scary story I want to talk about is people that are natural savers and natural stewards, meaning they're willing to deny themselves things. And they are hardwired to have this attitude of saving for a rainy day and delaying gratification, which is a beautiful thing to have. It's a great way to be hardwired, right? Because, financially anyway, you can really set yourself up nice. But this scary story is a little bit different in that what ends up happening, in my observation, is as someone like this, with this attitude, as they get older, there's a switch that happens. And I can't really identify when this happens yet. I don't have enough data yet or enough perspective on this one yet. But what ends up happening with the automatic saver, the good steward, suddenly they realize, I don't have to save for a rainy day anymore. In fact, I'm going to die with way too much money. and then they scramble to figure out how to use their money and create some experiences or make it meaningful because they realize that they're probably just going to die with a ton of money and it's just going to get divided up. I've dealt with this a few times, and it can be sad because they worked longer than they wanted to. They denied themselves spending money on trips with grandkids or travel for themselves or education that they wanted to do because they were always hardwired to save for a rainy day. And then all of a sudden they get to be 78, 80, and they're like, oh my goodness, I could have done a lot more. That's sad. That's a little scary too. How do you navigate that perfectly? I don't know. But it's a scary story and something we need to at least be aware of so we can make the most of the only life that we have. All right. You know what? I'm tired of being scared and these cautionary tales. Let's go talk to Nicole and get happy. I want to suck your blood.
Welcome to the Happy Lab.
Oh, Lord. Well, we need to be happy because I feel like those scary stories...
They were pretty depressing. Ooh.
I know. I don't know how you do a happy, scary story when it comes to cautionary tales. That's sort of how they work, right?
Right.
So we need to get happy.
We do. You need some Halloween candy? What can we...
Yeah, I need some sugar, something to cheer me up. Something to cheer everybody else up.
Yes.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to set a 7-day goal, little baby step to not just live a happier life, but a awesome retirement. Today's Halloween, Nicole.
Can't wait. Trick or treating.
Trick or treat. So for the next 7 days, you hereby have permission by me, the Retirement Answer Man, to eat as much candy as you want tonight. And then, hey, for the next 7 days, why not? Go for it. But don't blame me when your belly hurts. What are you going to eat, Nicole?
I'm hoping that I will find some Milky Way Midnights, but those are hard to find in the Halloween candy.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
It's dark chocolate. You approve of dark chocolate.
I love it. That's the healthy chocolate.
Yeah. When you mix it with nougat and caramel, I'm not so sure, but...
All right, so have fun eating candy, guys. All right, so we're going to have the results of our pumpkin carving contest here over the next few weeks as we process all the photos that we've gotten. And the way that you're going to know and see all these great pumpkin carving pictures that we see is to sign up for 6 Shot Saturday, and you can do that at rogerwhitney.com.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.